So this is the first time we've done a video on poles, so I thought I'd combine two things. One, I want to talk to you about how and when to use poles, which I find really useful, but also do it at the same time while launching the new Skytera and Skysolo range from Leki, probably the most famous pole brand in the world. So I must admit, I'm really happy that the myth of, oh, I'm not old enough to need poles yet, sort of theory has gone. Everyone used to think that you only need them when you get to a certain age and you can't look after yourself anymore and go up and down hills. Now, that's a load of rubbish. Have a think about this. Ultra runners who want to win races and go as fast as they can and all that sort of thing will cut labels out of their clothes, they won't take their jackets, they might not even take any water, yet they'll still take running poles with them. Why is that? Because they make an absolutely massive difference. So I'll move on to talking about the product later. I mean, this is the new Skytera and I absolutely love it and I can't wait to use this a load more. But I want to talk about when you would use poles and how to use them. So yeah, like I say, I get asked really regularly in the shop, well, when should you use poles? My answer is whenever you go walking or running. And that's because, let's be honest, you go up and down hills nearly every time we go on a walk. Admittedly, I probably wouldn't take them if it was totally flat and a lot of hard terrain. But anytime I'm up and down on a hill, which is what most people do, I would absolutely take poles. And certainly I'll take them once a big rucksack comes on, which again, if it's a big day out, you're likely to have with you. And the next question might be, why would I take poles? Well, they help a lot. They can transfer a lot of the weight through your arms instead of all being on your legs. In fact, sometimes we have weighing scales out in the shop so that you can stand on them and then hold some poles, and it's really noticeable how much weight comes off your feet when you do that. Now just imagine multiplying that throughout the whole day and the amount of times that's done on one leg. You can save your knees so much bother. I remember a long time ago running down off Scarfell trying to get last orders in the pub. I had poles, my friends didn't. The next day, his legs were absolute agony and burning, so he'd sprinted down with big rucksacks on. I had my poles. I took a huge amount of weight and force through the poles, and I wasn't too bad. So that was a real game changer for me. It's just so obvious what a difference they make. And of course, the longer the walk, the gnarlier the terrain, the multi-day sort of nature of it all, the more likely poles come into use. And then after that, one of the most simple things for me is making sure you use them correctly. So a lot of people come in and go, yeah, but when I've used them before, they're really annoying because, you know, my hands ache by the end of the day and holding them all day gets tiring. I think you might be doing something wrong there because a lot of it is to do with this strap. So if you're gripping it all day, yeah, it can get a bit tiring and a bit annoying. Also, going up and down hills doesn't really work because you just can't get the angle right because our wrists don't bend that way and your hand has to be gripping the pole. So really, really quick, simple thing. Always up from underneath, hand over the top. And so all the weight, as you can see, is going through the webbing on the top of the pole. I literally don't have to grab the pole to put all the weight through it. I can push like that. And that means going up a hill or down a hill, you can sort of straight arm it to take a lot of the weight, or going up the hill, you can push really hard through that webbing, just like you would pushing out of a chair or getting out of a swimming pool, something like that. You don't have to rely on the grip. In fact, you can just not hold it if you want and it will still work. Don't get tempted to come down through the webbing like that because you won't get the weight through the palm of your hand and it'll be a lot of strain straight through the wrist there. It just doesn't work the same. And then fitting the pole, obviously I'll go to length in a minute, but usually once you've come up and through the webbing, I think you want your hand quite near the top and so that you can feel that your fingers all fit into the ergonomics of the pole. So usually quite near the top. The reason I'm explaining that is nearly all poles you can adjust the length of this webbing. And on Leki, I really like their system. It works really well and it's really clear and quite satisfying as well. So usually you pull the top of the webbing, hear that click and see that open. That allows more or less of it to slide in and out depending on the size of your hand. Once you've got it set just right, pull it back down and it'll lock in place and stay exactly where you need it. And then the other thing that's obviously needs to be talked about is the length of the pole. So the rule of thumb is you want it so that your arm is at right angles. So when your arm is at perfect right angle like that, you want your hand neatly in the pole where you want to hold it. And obviously you can change the height to work for you. When you're considering the height, something to take into account is the fact that this bit at the bottom obviously is going to vary a little bit how far it goes into the ground. If it's really, really solid, you'll be hitting that carbide tip and that comes into play. If it's soft and it sinks in all the way up to the hilt, then obviously you're going to be losing a few centimeters. So give that some thought. And then there's a huge range of poles out there, of course, and the first thing I think people need to think about is whether they want what's called like a micro stick or a Z pole or whatever you want to call this style of pole, or the original style telescopic poles. I don't want to go into too much detail here because that's probably a whole video in itself, but essentially if you have a telescopic pole, it can be a lot stronger, but it's usually a little bit heavier because the poles have to overlap, and so there's a lot of crossover. Now that does mean there's often a lot more options to get the height just right and maybe easier to maintain, so you can take it apart and adjust things, but also that comes at a bit of a weight penalty. Now don't get me wrong, they're far from heavy, but they are heavier than things like micro sticks. Now just to be clear, when I call it a micro stick, what I mean is anything that will fold up like this. So it will fall into little pieces, and so it can pack up a lot smaller. Now for me, this was a game changer because the telescopic poles always had to sit quite a lot longer than that. And when you took them winter mountaineering, they would stick out the top of your rucksack. You'd catch them on things while you were climbing. And actually it meant you kind of thought, shall I even take them? Ever since these came out, always come with me because they live in my bag. I hardly know they're there, and they don't stick up further than my rucksack. And it's this sort of pole that I think's revolutionized like what people think about them. So that's why runners will take them, and anyone counting the grams will take them because they'll disappear into your bag, strap on the front if you need, yet they'll give you all that support and help you with going faster up hills and down hills and the flats. So yeah, basically whenever I'm doing anything remotely serious with quite a big walk-in, poles will come with me. Now do think about this, Leki always sell them in pairs. That's because it's much better for your gait to use too. A lot of people used to just use one, but you do find that you can sort of put your hip out and like you might learn really bad traits, sort of like limping around. So try and use two whenever you can. And also that is what really helps while powering up the hills and slowing yourself down. It's like having four legs. There's obviously loads more I can talk about the use of poles, but of course I want to move on to this beauty, the Skytera from Leki.
Got my Leki Skytera, been really useful so far this holiday, done more walking than climbing so far, super light, packing my bag, and we keep coming down these steep descent gullies when we go the wrong way, like this thing back up here. Absolute lifesaver, and then they go in my bag and disappear and don't know they're there. So yeah, brilliant. There's Rich coming down now, steep, bit rubbish. Wishes he had a pair.
So like I mentioned at the start, there's two new poles here at Outside from Leki. There's the Skytera and the Skysolo. I'll show you the Solo in a minute, but for me, I'm really excited about the Skytera. I really like the Skytera because I think it covers loads of different areas. It's basically an incredibly light pole. It's carbon fiber. I think it weighs only 178 grams per pole, so that is really, really light. It's not the lightest they make. They do make running specific ones, which are a lot lighter, but they're just not as burly either. People do actually manage to snap those on some of their big runs, and they do recommend they're for racing only, not training and things like that. Yeah, but when you're counting every gram, that is the right pole to have. However, if you want an all-rounder for your trekking, running, mountaineering, I think the Skytera is a great one to go for. But what's really impressive about this pole is how much it managed to pack in for something so light. So like I've already said, it's carbon fiber. You've seen how it folds down. It's incredibly small. What it's also got is a really nice plush handle. A lot of the time when they're making the lightest poles they can, they don't put too much up here to keep the weight down, but this has got the extra long handle, really nice foam, and a really nice mesh style strap. I actually much prefer this style of strap. I've used bigger bulky ones that have got padding in, which look like they should be the nice thing to use. Actually the thinner ones are much nicer. They spread the weight really well so they don't dig in at all. And also if it's really hot and sweaty, this just doesn't absorb any moisture, so it's nice and breathable. The foam they've used on the handle is called Verticon. I don't know what that really means, but it certainly feels incredible. And it's really nice in the hand and even works really well when sweaty because it sort of makes it feel nice and it also keeps its grip. I'll hardly ever use the lower part of the handle because I'm usually through the webbing up here, but it is quite useful if it's really contoury. You just have to accept that you take it out of here and hold it at an angle like that. In some places, particularly rocky terrain, that can be really useful. So another thing that's really cool they've packed into such a light pole is the fact that you can vary the height. A lot of the really light poles, you just have to buy the one height that fits you, but actually they've got this flick vario. So you can change it from 110 centimeters all the way up to 130, which just about works for me at 6'4". Now, of course, there are taller, bigger people than myself who this pole wouldn't work for. Now that's when you might want to consider something like the Skysolo, and I'll come on to that in a minute. Once you've moved that to the right place for you, you just lock it down, it holds it nice and secure. Now, probably the coolest new thing about this pole is the way that it unlocks so that you can pack it away. Folding poles or micro sticks, whatever you want to call them, in the past have had sort of an issue because they used to use this sort of button that would pop out once you pull one segment far enough away. Now that was good and it worked and it was very light, but it can be a little bit fiddly to do and sometimes it had some issues. Leki made a really nice new chunky one which works extremely well, and that's on the Skysolo. We'll see that in a minute, and that works brilliantly, but obviously it's a bit chunkier and it's a bit heavier. So this new locking system works really well. You get the pole set up, and when you're at the last section here, so the bit with the sizing on and then the bit with the handle, you pull it apart and you'll hear it click like that. It is now locked and ready to go. Of course, you have to put that down as if you've got the height just right. Now it's locked and I can use it. And then when you want to unlock it, again, open up the Vario section, slide those two parts apart, click, and now the whole pole will fall apart and pack away to a mere 40 centimeters. Awesome. And of course you get the features that you'd expect, a nice carbide tip that's incredibly durable and replaceable, and a small Nordic basket as they call it, which of course, again, you can replace. If you're using in snowy conditions, you might want to get a much bigger one to cope with the deep powder. Over the years, I've never had anything bigger than a small basket like that, and I must admit I prefer it that way, because even though occasionally it'll sink into the deeper snow, when I get to the route I'm climbing, if you are climbing, I don't want the big basket packing away in my bag. If you are trekking in deep snow and they're out all day, you probably want to change to the bigger basket. And so they're moving on. Now I've got the Skysolo. This is the Skytera's big brother. Now I'm leaving all the bits on it because it's not actually my pole, it's off stock, so I've got to keep it nice and clean. A lot of the features are the same. It's still a micro stick, it's made of carbon, it folds up nice and small. Main changes are, it is a bigger, beefier version of the Skytera. So when I say big and beefy, still incredibly light. It's 238 grams per pole, and it still only packs down to 42 centimeters. So definitely a small light pole, even though it's much more durable. Now the reason you may move on to the Skysolo rather than the Skytera is the fact that the size of it. Hopefully you remember that just a minute ago I mentioned that the Skytera only goes up to 130, and while that's fine for me, obviously there are bigger, heavier people than that, and you may want to move on to the Skysolo because it goes all the way up to 140. So the variability goes from 120 all the way up to 140. Now you might be saying, well, it won't go small enough for everyone. That's because if you are smaller than that height, you're likely to have a smaller frame and you won't need such a chunky pole, because the diameter of this pole is more than the Skytera and it will take more of a beating. As you can see, the foam on the handle comes down a lot further and you get those bigger snow trekking baskets I mentioned before. The Skysolo has got that chunkier locking mechanism I mentioned. I really like this, it's really satisfying. You quite simply click the button and you notice it already falls apart and the tension is gone, so you can fold the pole up. Now when you're putting micro poles back together, I find the easiest thing to do is to let the whole lot just hang below you, get the top two segments, so always make sure you're not pulling down here, pull them apart and then wait for the click. Hear that? It's already locked. So it's back in the locking mechanism, so it's dead easy, and then you can change your sliding height just to get that just right. And again, when you're ready to go, blink, pop it away. One of the main reasons I really love Leki is the fact that they are so good with repairs and fixing things yourself. Now, while I've actually never snapped a pole, which is quite impressive for a big heavy guy who's quite clumsy, it does happen. You can do that. You can get issues, you can wear points out, all those type of things. Leki have spent a lot of time thinking about keeping your stuff out of landfill and using it so you can repair it. In the past, of course, that meant sending it off and getting it done professionally, but what's really cool now about their latest poles is a lot of this can be done at home. Like I mentioned before, you can change baskets, you can add rubber bungs if you're walking on hard ground, you can change the carbide tips. But what was always a bit trickier is if you snapped a section for whatever reason, it was really hard to do. Not anymore. So what you do with both the poles I've talked about today is pull them apart so they fall into their different sections. And you'll notice they're held together with this really durable string here, which is covered in a nice plastic coating. Now the fun bit, they've got this little tiny plastic piece here, which at the moment I can actually do with my fingers and untwist. If you're finding that too stiff, which often you will do, having used it quite a lot by the time you come to do this, you can actually use a spanner. I think it looks around a 9mm. I didn't have one, so I've got an adjustable one with me, and that works really well. Then the whole section can slide off and you can just replace that part and then put it all back together and reverse the process. Now I really like that, because I do remember the days of when you broke your folding pole, it was kind of like, sorry, game over. And some other brands really need to do some work to catch up with Leki, because they're really committed to making sure that you can repair and keep using your poles. In fact, going forward, I've seen some really cool repair kits that they're bringing to market. So even if you break something out in the field, you can get back home and still use your poles. Leki is one of the few brands that actually holds spare parts for poles they've stopped manufacturing. That's so if you do have an accident, you break a section, something like that, you can repair it yourself and keep using it and not have to bin it and buy a new pair. So I'm really happy with that new Sky range. I think walkers, climbers, trekkers, runners, if you do a bit of all of that, why not get the Skytera? If you want something a bit burlier, consider the Skysolo. Really versatile. And if you haven't used poles before, you've really got to give it a go. Even if you don't commit to buying them, borrow a friend's, I bet you love it. Particularly these folding poles, they just pack away so small, disappear in a bag. If you're going travelling, why not take them with you? We've gone some big walks abroad, it's really nice to have your poles with you. Think about your poor knees and give your arms a bit of a workout while you're at it. So I hope this converted you to poles. We've got loads more videos on our YouTube channel, so maybe give us a subscribe. If you get a chance to come in the shop, have a go with them yourself or check them out on our website.